The loudspeaker crackled across Blackwater Bridge like the voice of God rendered in static and malice. Medics don't fight, Lieutenant. Surrender and walk away. Morgan Reeves didn't flinch. She knelt in the blood of men who couldn't stand, couldn't run, couldn't survive the next 8 hours without her. 4 wounded soldiers behind her position, 37 enemy fighters closing through the Appalachian fog, and between them, 60 feet of rotting steel suspended over a gorge that had swallowed better men than any of them. She pulled the charging handle on her M4. The metallic snap echoed off the bridge's iron bones. Then she whispered back what they couldn't hear. "Watch me." The New River churned black and cold in the darkness below. Above, fog rolled through the steel trusses like the breath of something ancient and hungry. Dawn wouldn't come for 8 more hours. Extraction, not until then. And the woman they'd just dismissed as a helpless medic had a past that would make strong men look away. But that was later. That was the ending of a night that hadn't yet begun. This story starts 8 hours earlier when the world was still intact, and Morgan Reeves was just another soldier trying to forget who she used to be. 8 hours earlier. The convoy rolled through mountain switchbacks at 23 miles per hour. Too slow to outrun an ambush. Too fast to spot tripwires in the dark. 21:47 hours. October cold settling into the Appalachian hollows like something with weight and intention. The kind of cold that finds the gaps in your body armor and reminds you that flesh is just meat waiting for the right temperature to fail. Morgan sat in the third Humvee watching the tree line slide past her window. Evergreens black against darker sky. No moon tonight, no stars. Just the yellow cones of headlights cutting through fog that seemed to rise up from the earth itself. She'd made this run 17 times in 3 months. Medical convoy from Firebase Condor to the field hospital at Raleigh County. Supplies out, wounded back, routine as breathing. The kind of assignment they gave to soldiers who needed something safe and boring and far from anything that mattered. The kind of assignment they gave to operators who'd broken in ways the Army didn't have paperwork for. "Sarge," Morgan turned. Corporal Eliza Brennan sat across from her in the troop bay, 23 years old and still believing the world made sense. Blonde hair pulled back in regulation bun. Blue eyes that hadn't seen enough war to stop trusting people. She held a Tupperware container in her lap like it was something precious. "Made you something," Eliza said. She opened the container. The smell hit Morgan before she saw what was inside. Bread. Fresh bread. The kind that reminded you that somewhere in the world, people still had kitchens and ovens and Sunday mornings that didn't involve checking casualty reports. "Cuban bread," Eliza said. Her smile was shy, proud. "My grandmother's recipe. She came from Havana in '62. Taught my mother. My mother taught me. Figured you'd been eating MREs long enough." Morgan took a piece, still warm. The crust crackled under her fingers. She bit into it and tasted butter and salt and something like home, if home was a place she'd ever actually been. "It's perfect," Morgan said. The words came out rough. She cleared her throat. "Really, this is perfect. You make this at the firebase. Use the field kitchen at 0300. Sergeant Keller said if I cleaned up after myself, he wouldn't report me for unauthorized use of government equipment." Eliza's smile widened. "I told him I'd make him 2 loaves next time. He said deal." Smart negotiation. "Learn from watching you." Eliza leaned forward. The truck hit a pothole and they both swayed with the chassis. Outside, the forest pressed close enough to touch the windows. Morgan could smell pine resin and wet earth through the ventilation system. "You know what I'm going to do," Eliza said. "When I get out. I mean really out. When this deployment ends and I process my discharge papers. Tell me. I'm opening a bakery right in the middle of Louisville, Kentucky. Gonna call it Brennan's Bread. Specialize in international stuff. Cuban bread like this, Irish soda bread from my dad's side, French baguettes, Italian focaccia, German pumpernickel. All of it." Her eyes were bright, full of futures that seemed possible in the warmth of bread and diesel engines. "I've been saving my combat pay. Got almost $20,000. Talked to a commercial real estate agent in Louisville. There's a storefront on Bardstown Road. Perfect location. High foot traffic. Near the university." Morgan looked at her, really looked. This kid who still believed in futures, who still thought you could go home and open bakeries and pretend the things you'd done here didn't follow you into every kitchen and every morning after. "You'll be good at it," Morgan said. And she meant it. Some people were built for war. Others were just passing through on their way to somewhere better. "You think so?" "I know so. You've got the discipline, the precision. Baking is just chemistry and attention to detail. You're already good at both." Eliza's smile could have lit the whole truck. You gotta promise you'll visit. When you're back stateside, wherever you end up, I'll make you a whole display case. Whatever you want. Free for life. I'll hold you to that. Good, because I'm serious. Eliza closed the container, put it back in her pack. What about you, Sarge? What are you gonna do when you get out? Morgan looked out the window, at the darkness sliding past, at her own reflection, ghost pale in the glass. I don't think about it much. Why not? Because planning for a future you might not have is a good way to get disappointed. Eliza was quiet for a moment. Then, that's the saddest thing I've ever heard you say. Before Morgan could respond, the convoy slowed. Up ahead, brake lights flared red through the fog. Morgan felt it before she heard it, that shift in air pressure, that change in the taste of the night. Her hand moved to her rifle before her conscious mind caught up. The radio squawked, Captain Torres's voice from the lead vehicle. Calm, professional. The voice of a man who'd done this enough times to know when something was wrong. All units possible obstruction on the road. Hold position while the world exploded. Not metaphorically, not dramatically, just exploded. The kind of explosion that turns night into day, and sound into pressure and air into a fist that punches through your chest and scrambles your brain into alphabet soup. The late Humvee lifted off the ground, not much, maybe 3 feet, but enough. Enough to see daylight under the tires, enough to see the fireball bloom underneath like a flower made of hate and physics. IED, improvised explosive device, the soldier's lottery. The thing that turned a Tuesday into memorial service and whole men into medical waste. The lead truck came down hard. Morgan's truck swerved. The driver screaming something. Tires shrieking. Then gunfire. Muzzle flashes from the tree line like fireflies with murderous intent. Contact left, contact right. The ambush was perfect. Textbook. Professional. Whoever planned this knew what they were doing. Morgan grabbed Eliza. Down, get down. They hit the floor of the troop bay. Rounds punched through the armor. Not penetrating, not yet, but close. So close, Morgan could hear them singing their little songs of velocity and hate. The convoy surged forward, the driver laying on the accelerator. Running the ambush. Standard procedure when you can't fight and can't stay. You run, and you pray that speed is enough. It wasn't. The second truck took an RPG to the engine block. The rocket-propelled grenade hit with a sound like God slamming a door. The truck lurched sideways, died, rolled to a stop with smoke pouring from under the hood and men screaming inside. Torres' voice on the radio, still calm, too calm, the kind of calm that only comes when you've accepted what's about to happen. All units, we are abandoning vehicles. Infantry formation, rally point is Blackwater Bridge, 2 clicks, northeast. Wounded to the bridge, everyone else provides cover. Execute now. Morgan was moving before he finished speaking. Muscle memory. Training that lived deeper than thought. She grabbed her rifle, grabbed her medkit, grabbed Eliza by the vest, and pulled her toward the door. Stay with me, Morgan said. Don't stop. Don't look back. You run until I tell you to stop running. They piled out into chaos. Gunfire from 3 directions. Grenades thumping in the forest. Smoke everywhere. The smell of burning diesel and cordite, and something organic that Morgan's brain refused to identify as human. Soldiers running, some wounded, some carrying wounded. The night lit up by tracer rounds that drew red lines across Morgan's vision like the devil's own geometry. She saw Torres, saw him pointing, saw him screaming orders nobody could hear over the gunfire, saw him go down when a round took him in the shoulder, saw him get back up, keep moving, keep leading. Good officer, the kind that died first because they stayed visible. Morgan ran, Eliza beside her. They made it 50 yards before Morgan saw them. 4 soldiers, wounded, 1 on a stretcher. 3 dragging themselves through the dirt. Nobody to carry them, nobody to cover them. The convoy was fractured, scattered. Every man for himself and God help whoever couldn't keep up. Morgan stopped. Sarge, Eliza's voice, confused, scared. Sarge, we gotta move. Morgan looked at the wounded, looked at the tree line, calculated the math in half a second. 4 wounded men, 2 medics. 2 clicks to the bridge, through hostile terrain, at night. Under fire. The math didn't work. She did it anyway. Brennan, grab that stretcher. I'll take the other 3. Sarge, we can't. We can, and we will. Now move. They moved. God, they moved. Morgan didn't remember the next 20 minutes. Her body did. Her training did. Lift, drag, carry, patch, move, repeat. The world reduced to inches, to breath. to the weight of men who were dying and the distance to somewhere that might keep them alive a little longer. Gunfire followed them, faded. The ambush stayed fixed on the convoy. Small mercies, tiny blessings in a night that offered nothing else. When they reached Blackwater Bridge, Morgan's legs were shaking. Her arms were lead. Her vision was tunneling down to a pinpoint. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Not while there was work to do. The bridge was old, Korean War construction, 2 lanes of asphalt on a steel truss frame that probably should have been condemned 20 years ago. It spanned a gorge 60 feet deep. The New River at the bottom, black water moving fast over rocks that would kill you just as dead as bullets. Morgan dropped the last wounded man onto the bridge deck, checked his pulse. Still there. Thready, weak, but there. She moved to the next, her hands working on autopilot. IV lines, pressure bandages, tourniquets, the medic's liturgy. The prayer you say with your hands because words don't stop bleeding. Eliza worked beside her. Silent, focused, good medic, better than good. The kind who kept her head when the world turned to blood and screaming. Morgan counted her patients, 4 total. Sergeant Garrett Thorne, 35, squad leader before he took shrapnel to the chest. The wound was bad, sucking chest wound, the kind that whistled when he breathed. She'd applied a chest seal, but it was barely holding. He needed a surgeon. Needed one an hour ago. Wasn't going to get one. Specialist Declan Walsh, 30. Former linebacker from Alabama before he joined up. Right hand destroyed. 3 fingers gone. Left shoulder bleeding through a pressure bandage. Tourniquet on the arm. Still conscious. Still tracking. Tough bastard. The kind who'd joke about it later, if there was a later. Private Finn Aldridge, 19. Both legs shattered below the knee. Compound fractures. Bone through skin. He was in shock. Pupils dilated. Skin gray. His body shutting down systems to preserve the core. Morgan gave him morphine, gave him fluids, gave him words that were lies but necessary. You're gonna be fine, Private. I've seen worse. Way worse. And Corporal Eliza Brennan, 23, the kid who wanted to open a bakery, who'd taken shrapnel during the ambush. Small fragments, dozens of them, embedded in her belly like she'd been used for target practice. Not immediately fatal, but not good. Not good at all. Morgan dressed the wounds, said nothing. Eliza was a medic. She knew. She knew exactly what those wounds meant and what happened when they went untreated for too long. 22:13 hours. Morgan checked her watch. Dawn at 06:18. That was 8 hours. 8 hours to keep 4 men alive on a bridge in the middle of nowhere with no backup and no extraction. She pulled out her radio, keyed the transmit. Condor, this is Raven Actual. We have 4 critical casualties at Blackwater Bridge, requesting immediate medevac. How copy? Static. She tried again. Condor Raven Actual. Radio check. How do you read? Nothing, not even carrier wave hiss. The radio was dead. Not broken. Dead. Someone was jamming them. Someone close enough to block their frequency with precision. Morgan looked at the tree line, at the fog, at the darkness that pressed in from all sides. They were alone. Walsh propped himself against the steel I-beam, blood running from his shoulder. His mangled hand pressed against his chest. He looked at Morgan with eyes that had seen enough combat to know when the situation was fucked beyond all redemption. Sarge, he said, we still getting picked up. Morgan clipped the radio back to her vest, forced a smile she didn't feel. Absolutely, just a signal issue. Fog's thick tonight. It wasn't a signal issue. She knew that. He knew that. But soldiers lied to each other about a lot of things. Hope being the biggest one. Morgan moved to the eastern edge of the bridge. Looked down. 60 feet to the water. The gorge walls were sheer rock. No way down except falling. No way across except this bridge. And this bridge connected Fayette County to Raleigh County across the only passable terrain for 30 miles in any direction. Control this bridge, and you controlled movement through these mountains. Whoever was jamming their radio wasn't random. This was deliberate, planned, professional. Reeves, she turned. Walsh was staring at her, his good hand on his rifle, his eyes tracking the western approach. I heard movement, he said, on the west side, maybe 200 meters out. Morgan dropped to one knee, pulled her scope to her eye. The AN/PVS-14 night vision monocular painted the tree line in pale green. Nothing visible yet, but Walsh had infantry ears. If he said movement, there was movement. How many, Morgan asked. Hard to say, more than a few. They're being careful. Morgan lowered the scope, counted her assets. 4 wounded soldiers. Walsh could hold a weapon with one hand. Maybe. Aldridge couldn't walk. Thorne was barely conscious. Eliza was wounded herself but still functioning. And Morgan, she carried an M4 with 6 magazines, a Beretta M9 with 3, 2 fragmentation grenades, 1 smoke, and a combat knife she'd carried since BUD/S. BUD/S, basic underwater demolition/SEAL training. She pushed that thought down fast. That was another life, another woman, someone who didn't exist anymore. Walsh, Morgan said, "Can you hold a weapon?" He looked at his mangled right hand, the remaining thumb and index finger wrapped in gauze. Then he picked up his rifle with his left hand, adjusted his grip, found the trigger. "I can pull a trigger, Sarge. That's all I need." "Good. Set up on the eastern pylon. Anything comes from the western tree line, you call it before you shoot." "Understood." "Roger that." He moved. Slowly. Painfully. But he moved. Good soldier. The kind who kept fighting even when his body was breaking down around him. Morgan turned to Aldridge. The kid was shaking. Not from cold, from shock settling in deep and permanent. "Aldridge, look at me." He did. His pupils were blown wide. Fear and morphine in the body's last-ditch effort to keep the brain online. "You're going to be fine," Morgan said. "I've kept people alive through worse than this." "Worse than this," his voice cracked. "My legs are, I know, bilateral tib-fib fractures. Compound, messy, but survivable. You hear me, survivable?" He nodded, didn't believe her, but nodded anyway. That was enough for now. "I need you to do something for me," Morgan said. "Can you still use your arms?" "Yes, Sarge." "Good. I'm putting an M4 next to you. You don't touch it unless I say so, but if I say so, you aim at the widest part of whatever I'm pointing at and you squeeze. Can you do that?" Aldridge swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing in a throat too thin. "I've never shot at a person before." Morgan looked at him, at this 19-year-old kid who'd enlisted because college was expensive and the recruiter had promised him technical training and a steady paycheck, who'd never expected to be bleeding out on a bridge in West Virginia with a stranger telling him to kill people. "Neither have I," Morgan said. It was the first lie she told that night. It wouldn't be the last. She moved back to this western edge. The fog was thickening, rolling up from the gorge in slow curtains that smelled like wet iron and rotting leaves. Then the loudspeaker crackled. Not their radio, something external. A PA system, vehicle-mounted, broadcasting from somewhere in the western tree line. "Attention American soldiers on Blackwater Bridge." The voice was calm, almost polite. It had the cadence of someone reading from a script. Practiced, measured, without emotion. Morgan's jaw tightened. Professional. Whoever this was had done this before. "We know your radio is down. We know your convoy has departed. We know you have wounded personnel who cannot be moved." Walsh looked at Morgan from 20 feet away. His eyes said what his mouth didn't. "They know everything." "We are offering you a single opportunity," the voice continued. "Leave your weapons on the bridge. Walk east. No one will follow you. No one will be harmed." Pause. Static. Then the kicker. "You are a medical unit. We have no quarrel with medics. Medics don't fight." The loudspeaker clicked off. Silence returned. Heavier now. Loaded with the weight of what had just been said. Aldridge's voice trembled from behind her. "Sarge, maybe we should know. But they said what they wanted us to hear. That's called psychological operations, Aldridge. And the fact that they're using it means they don't want to fight. You know what that tells me? What? They're scared of what's on this bridge." She said it with more confidence than she felt. But confidence was currency right now, and she was spending everything she had. The truth was more complicated. This was a well-organized militia force, probably 30 to 40 fighters based on the communication sophistication, trying to seize this bridge, control the crossing, control the movement corridor. Classic territorial denial. And they expected a medical unit to fold. Why wouldn't they? Morgan looked down at her uniform, the medic patch on her shoulder, the red cross on her helmet. Everything about her screamed non-combatant, but underneath the medic vest pressed flat against her chest plate was something else. Something she hadn't shown anyone in 3 years. She reached under her vest, pulled it out, held it in her palm. The Navy SEAL trident, the eagle, the pistol, the anchor. The symbol of the deadliest warriors the American military had ever created. And beneath it, the expert sniper qualification badge. She'd earned both 7 years ago in a life that felt like someone else's dream. 3 deployments, 214 confirmed engagements. A nickname whispered in intelligence briefings across 3 continents. The ghost of Helmand Province. Morgan closed her eyes, saw the face she always saw when that name surfaced. A boy, maybe 8 years old, standing behind a Taliban commander she'd been tracking for 6 weeks. The memory hit her like a physical blow. Helmand Province, Afghanistan. 3 years ago. The valley stretched out below her position like a canvas painted in dust and blood. She'd been tracking Commander Rashid Ahmadi for 42 days, tracking his movements, his patterns, his security, waiting for the one moment when the shot would be clean and the kill would be certain. That moment came at 1400 hours on a Tuesday that felt like every other Tuesday in a war that had no Tuesdays, only endless repetitions of violence and waiting. Ahmadi stepped out of a compound, surrounded by guards, but there was a gap, a space, a window of opportunity that lasted maybe 3 seconds. Morgan's .300 Winchester Magnum was already aimed. Range 612 meters, wind 3 knots from the west, elevation compensated, breathing slow. Heart rate at 48 beats per minute. She saw Ahmadi, saw the gap, saw the shot. What she didn't see was the boy. He was standing behind Ahmadi, hidden by the commander's body. A child in a place where children shouldn't be but always were. 8 years old, maybe younger, wearing a blue shirt that would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life. Morgan fired. The round left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second. It traveled 612 meters in approximately 7/10 of a second. In that time, Morgan's brain was already processing the shot, already confirming the kill, already moving to the next phase of the operation. The bullet struck Ahmadi's center mass, textbook penetration, through the heart. He was dead before his nervous system could register pain. But .300 Winchester Magnum rounds don't stop when they kill. They keep going, through flesh, through bone, through the first target and into whatever's behind. The boy in the blue shirt. Morgan saw it through her scope, saw the boy's chest explode, saw him lifted off his feet by the impact, saw him fall. She'd killed the most wanted Taliban commander in Helmand Province, and she'd killed a child. The investigation cleared her. Rules of engagement were followed. The boy's presence was unpredictable. The commander used human shields. It was war. These things happen. None of that mattered. Morgan Reeves, the ghost of Helmand, the deadliest sniper in SEAL history, the woman who'd made 214 confirmed kills without hesitation, looked at that boy's body and broke. Not visibly, not immediately, but somewhere deep inside where the thing that makes you human lives something shattered beyond repair. She left special warfare 30 days later, retrained as a combat medic, swore she would never take another life. Every bullet she'd fired since then in training and qualification, she aimed low. Legs, shoulders, mobility kills. She would stop threats. She would not create ghosts. Morgan opened her eyes, back on the bridge, back in the present. The memory of Helmand fading but never gone. She looked at the trident in her hand, then slid it back under her vest, where it would stay hidden, where it belonged, because that woman, the ghost, didn't exist anymore. 22:31 hours. 3 minutes since the loudspeaker went silent. Movement on the western approach. 3 men, moving in a loose wedge formation. Quiet. No talking, no flashlights, but visible through the night optic. 2 carried rifles. The third had a handheld radio and what looked like wire cutters. Comms team. They were going to try to tap or cut the bridge's landline junction box. Morgan tracked them through her scope. The point man was moving with confidence. Too much confidence. He thought the bridge was undefended, or defended by medics who wouldn't shoot. She let them close. 80 meters, 70, 60. At 50 meters, the point man stopped, raised a hand. The other 2 halted. He was looking at something on the ground. Morgan shifted her scope and saw it. A thin wire she'd strung across the road at ankle height 20 minutes ago, connected to an empty IV bag filled with gravel. A noise trap, and he'd spotted it. Smart. These weren't amateurs. The point man knelt, carefully disconnected the wire, then waved his team forward. Morgan put her crosshairs on the radio in the third man's hand, breathed, let half the breath out, held. Her finger found the trigger, found the press, found that perfect moment between heartbeats where the world goes still and time becomes negotiable. One shot. The radio exploded into plastic and circuit fragments. The man screamed, clutched his hand, not destroyed, but lacerated, useless. The other 2 dropped flat. The point man rolled left, searching for the muzzle flash. Morgan had already shifted position, 15 feet from where she'd fired, a technique drilled into her during sniper school. Shoot and move, always. Contact west, Walsh called from his position. I see them. Two prone, one wounded. Hold fire, Morgan ordered. Let them pull back. The point man was shouting into the darkness, not at her, at his wounded teammate. Move back now. They scrambled. The two able-bodied fighters grabbed their injured comrade, dragged him back toward the tree line. In 30 seconds, they were gone. Morgan exhaled. One round expended, one enemy radio destroyed, one message sent. This bridge has teeth. Sarge, Aldridge's voice, steadier now. He'd watched the whole thing. That was you shot the radio out of his hand. I shot the radio. From 50 meters, at night, in fog. Morgan didn't respond. She was already repositioning, covering the northern approach, a narrow trail that wound down from the ridge above the bridge. Sarge, Aldridge said, his voice different now. Curious, maybe a little afraid. Who trained you to shoot like that? Morgan looked at him, at this kid who was starting to understand that the person keeping him alive wasn't who he thought she was. The United States Navy, she said. Aldridge went quiet. Walsh was staring at her with new eyes. Even Eliza had stopped working. All of them processing, calculating, trying to reconcile the medic who'd carried them to this bridge with the person who could shoot a radio out of someone's hand at 50 meters in the dark. Before anyone could ask more questions, Thorne spoke. His voice was wet, damaged. Each word cost him something he couldn't afford to spend. Reeves. Morgan moved to his stretcher, knelt beside him. Thorne, save your strength. I read your file, he said. His eyes were fever bright. Pain and blood loss doing things to his inhibitions. Before this deployment, I read everyone's file. Thorne, yours was thin, real thin, basic training, infantry school, combat medic course, then a 3-year gap, no explanation. Then you show up at Condor running medical convoys. Morgan said nothing. So I called in a favor, Thorne continued. Friend at JSOC Joint Special Operations Command asked if they had anything on a Morgan Reeves. You know what he told me? Thorne, you need to rest. He said the file was classified, above his clearance. He said stop asking questions. Thorne's grip on her wrist was weak but desperate. And then he said if I was serving with you, I should count myself lucky, because there are maybe 5 people in the entire U.S. military who can do what you can do. The silence that followed was total. Walsh stopped watching the tree line. He was watching Morgan now. So was Aldridge. Even Eliza was staring. Morgan stood, walked away from Thorne. She needed space, needed air, needed to not have 4 people looking at her like she was something other than what she'd told them she was. But Thorne wasn't done. DEVGRU, he said. That's the gap, isn't it? Naval Special Warfare Development Group, SEAL Team 6. The 3 years you don't talk about. That's where you were. Morgan stopped, turned, looked at him. That was another life, she said quietly. That woman doesn't exist anymore. Bullshit. Thorne tried to sit up, couldn't, fell back. I've seen how you move, how you scan terrain, how you set up firing positions without thinking about it. You're not a medic who learned combat skills. You're a combat operator who learned medicine. Morgan pulled the trident from under her vest, held it where they could all see it. The eagle, the pistol, the anchor, the symbol of the deadliest warriors America had ever created. 3 deployments, she said. Her voice was flat, empty. 214 confirmed engagements. They called me the ghost of Helmand Province. Nobody spoke. And then I killed a child, Morgan continued. A boy, 8 years old, standing behind my target. The round went through the commander's chest and kept going. Right into that boy. He died instantly. And the woman who could make that shot, who could kill 214 people without hesitation, she died too. She slid the trident back under her vest. I swore I'd never take another life, she said. Every bullet I fire now I aim low. Legs, shoulders, I will stop threats. I will not create ghosts. The silence stretched, then Walsh spoke. So what happens when stopping threats isn't enough? When they come at us and we have to choose between your oath and our lives? Morgan looked at him, at all of them. Then I'll make that choice when it comes, but not before. Because the moment I start killing again, the moment I decide that oath doesn't matter, I become the thing I'm trying to forget. And I've spent 3 years learning how to be someone else. I'm not giving that up. Not for anything. 22:58 hours. The 5-minute deadline from the loudspeaker had expired. No response from Morgan. No surrender. At 23:19 hours, headlights appeared on the western road. 2 vehicles, moving fast. Technical trucks. Morgan recognized the silhouettes through her scope. Pickup trucks with welded weapon mounts. One carried what looked like an M2 heavy machine gun. The other had a mortar tube strapped to its bed. They were done talking. Walsh, Morgan said, two technicals approaching, heavy weapons. I see them. What's the play? Morgan looked at the bridge beneath her feet, at the corroded steel, at the maintenance access hatch she'd noticed during the initial setup, at the two fragmentation grenades on her vest. She made a decision that would define the rest of the night. Wait here, she said. Then she moved. She crawled to the center of the bridge, found the maintenance access hatch, a steel plate covering the internal support structure. She pulled it open. Beneath the bridge's main support beams were visible, massive steel I-beams running the full width of the span, bolted to cross members that were in several places visibly corroded. She found what she was looking for, a repair plate bolted over a section where the original steel had been replaced years ago. The bolts were rusted, the plate was thin. Perfect. She pulled both fragmentation grenades from her vest. Reeves, Thorne's voice, strained, confused. What are you doing, Aram? Making a choice. Those are frags. Yes, they are. You're going to blow the bridge. I'm going to blow part of it, the western third, create a gap they can't cross on foot, cut off their assault route. That also cuts off our retreat. Morgan looked at him, at all of them, 4 wounded soldiers who couldn't retreat anyway. We weren't retreating, she said. She rigged both grenades beneath the corroded repair plate, used medical tape and paracord for a remote pull, then crawled back to her position. The trucks were getting closer, 100 meters, 80, 60. They stopped at 40 meters, just at the edge of the western approach ramp, men dismounted. Morgan counted through her scope, 8 from the first truck, 6 from the second, all armed, all moving with practiced coordination. One of them began setting up the M2 on a tripod, position overlooking the bridge. That M2 could cut through their cover like paper, could kill all of them in seconds. Walsh, that M2 gets operational, we're dead. I need to blow it now. Do it! Morgan grabbed the paracord, thought about the boy in Helmand, about the promise she'd made to herself. Then she pulled. The explosion was enormous. 2 fragmentation grenades detonating against corroded steel created a blast that ripped a 40-foot section of the western span clean off its supports. Steel screamed. Concrete shattered. The entire bridge shuddered like a wounded animal. Debris rained down into the gorge below. When the dust cleared, there was a gap, 40 feet of empty space between Morgan's position and the western approach. No vehicle could cross it. No infantry could jump it. The M2 team scrambled backward. The mortar crew abandoned their setup. Shouts erupted from the tree line, confused, angry, disbelieving. Morgan looked at the gap she'd created and felt something she hadn't expected. Relief, because now for the first time tonight, the math worked. They couldn't reach her by ground, and she didn't have to shoot anyone to stop them. Thorne laughed from his stretcher, a painful gurgling laugh that turned into a cough. You crazy? He said. You actually blew the bridge. Part of it. You know what that means, right? When the engineers see this, I'll deal with the engineers. Right now, I'm dealing with the 30 guys who want to kill us. Walsh called out. They're pulling back. The trucks, repositioning. They'll try the mortar from standoff distance, Morgan said. They don't need to cross if they can drop rounds on us. She was right. At 23:41 hours, the first mortar round arced over the gorge and struck the roadway 60 meters east of their position. The explosion lit up the fog like a camera flash. Bright, brief, terrifying. Aldridge screamed. Short, Morgan called. They're walking it in. Everyone get behind the pylons, now. The rounds kept coming. Second round 40 meters east. Third 25. Fourth 15. Each one closer, each one adjusting. Morgan grabbed Eliza, dragged her behind the thickest pylon she could reach. Walsh pulled Aldridge to cover. Thorne couldn't move. So Morgan threw herself over his stretcher, used her own body as a shield. The impact was close, 8 feet maybe. Close enough that shrapnel pinged off the pylon above them. Close enough that the shockwave compressed her chest and made her ears ring. Blood trickled from her nose. Blast concussion. But she didn't move. Kept her body between Thorne and the explosions. 11 rounds total, then silence. Morgan waited. 10 seconds, 20, 30. No more impacts. They're out, she whispered, either out of rounds or saving them. She rolled off Thorne's stretcher. He was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. You covered me, he said. You're my patient. You used yourself as a shield. Standard procedure. No, it isn't, Reeves, not even close. Morgan wiped blood from her nose. Checked his chest seal. Still intact. His pulse was thready but present. How much time? Thorne asked. She checked her watch. 23:58 hours. 6 hours and 20 minutes until dawn, she said. The bridge was cut. The mortars were spent. The enemy was regrouping. And Morgan Reeves had just survived the opening round of the longest night of her life. She checked her remaining ammunition. 5 magazines for the M4. 3 for the Beretta. No grenades. 6 hours. 4 wounded. 1 bridge. 30 fighters who were just learning what she already knew. Then the voice came, not over the loudspeaker, just a man's voice, carrying across the 40-foot gap. Lieutenant Morgan Reeves. Her blood stopped. Full name. Rank. A figure stood at the edge of the gap, hands visible, unarmed, late 50s, gray hair cropped military short. Colonel Vincent Hargrave, the man said. United States Army, retired. I know about Helmand Province, I know about the Ghost, and I know you swore you'd never kill again. Morgan stood, walked to the western rail, raised her rifle, put the crosshair center mass. Then come and take this bridge, Colonel. Hargrave smiled. She could see it even at 40 feet. Before dawn, Ghost, one way or another, this bridge will be mine. He turned, walked back into the tree line, and Morgan Reeves stood alone on a broken bridge and wondered if tonight was the night her oath would finally break. Part 2. 0 hours. Midnight had come and gone like a promise that couldn't be kept. The bridge groaned beneath Morgan's boots, metal fatigue spreading through steel that had held for 70 years and was now being asked to hold for 6 more hours against forces it was never designed to withstand. She moved along the eastern span, checking sight lines, measuring distances, her brain doing calculations that felt more like breathing than thinking. Range, wind, elevation, the mathematics of controlled violence. The fog had thinned slightly, enough to see the tree line, not enough to see what was moving inside it. But Morgan could feel them out there. 30-plus fighters regrouping, planning, adjusting tactics based on what they'd learned. They'd learned she could shoot. They'd learned she wouldn't surrender. They'd learned the bridge had a 40-foot gap they couldn't cross. What they didn't know yet was whether she'd kill to defend it. Morgan wasn't sure of that answer herself. Behind her, Thorne's breathing had changed again. Shallower, faster, his body compensating for blood loss, for internal injuries that were getting worse by the hour. She'd seen it before. The body's last stand, every system working overtime to keep the organism alive just a little longer. She knelt beside him, checked his pulse. 140 beats per minute. Too fast. His heart hammering to push blood through a cardiovascular system running critically low. Thorne, she said quietly, stay with me. His eyes open, fever bright, unfocused. Still here, Reeves? Good. I need you to tell me something. Tell me about Sarah, your wife. Confusion flickered across his face. Why? Because I need you focused on something worth staying alive for. So tell me about her. Thorne's lips moved, dry, cracked. Morgan held a water bottle to his mouth. Let him sip. Not too much. Couldn't risk aspiration. Sarah, he said. The name seemed to ground him. She makes cornbread from scratch every Sunday, real cornbread. Not from a box. Says using a mix is an insult to her grandmother's memory. What else? He paused, breathed. The sound was wet, damaged. She sings in the shower every morning. Thinks I can't hear her through the door. She's terrible, completely tone deaf. Can't carry a tune to save her life. But you love it. I love it. A ghost of a smile crossed his cracked lips. Because it means she's happy. Means she's not thinking about whether I'm coming home from this deployment. Just thinking about whatever song she heard on the radio. Morgan's chest tightened. Then you stay alive for Sunday cornbread and bad shower singing. 6 hours, Thorne. That's all I need from you. 6 hours, he repeated. His eyes closed. I can do 6 hours. Morgan stood. But before she could move, Thorne's hand caught her wrist. Weak, but insistent. Reeves, what happens if I don't make it 6 hours? She looked at him. At this 35-year-old sergeant who'd led men through hell and was now lying on a bridge bleeding internally. He deserved honesty. If I don't get you to a surgical team in the next 4 hours, the internal bleeding is going to overwhelm your body's ability to compensate. You'll go into irreversible shock. 4 hours, he did the math. Dawn is in 6:20. Yes. So I've got a buffer. 2 hours and 20 minutes of margin for error. That's one way to look at it. Thorne's grip tightened. Then you better hold this bridge, Lieutenant, Because I've got a wife in Knoxville who will never forgive me if I die on a Wednesday. Morgan squeezed his hand, then stood and walked back to the western edge. Movement on the northern ridge, not the western approach. North, different vector. Walsh, she called. North side, check it. Walsh shifted position carefully, his wounded shoulder making him grimace. I see lights, 4, maybe 5, moving down the gorge trail. Morgan pulled her scope, found them immediately. 4 figures descending a narrow switchback trail carved into the gorge wall. They had headlamps, rope, moving with practiced confidence. They've scouted this, Morgan said. What? They've scouted the gorge. This isn't improvised. They knew about that trail. They planned secondary approaches in case the bridge was blocked. Thorne coughed from his stretcher. That means they planned everything. The ambush, the separation, the jamming. This isn't opportunistic. This is coordinated. Morgan lowered her scope, which means whoever's running this operation is professional, and professional enemies were the most dangerous kind. How long till they reach bottom? Walsh asked. Morgan calculated. 20 minutes, maybe less. Then they crossed the river and climbed the east wall. Another 30, 40 minutes. What? So we've got an hour before they're on top of us. Maybe, if there aren't more we can't see. Walsh checked his rifle with his mangled hand. 3 fingers gone. The movement made him wince, but he didn't complain. You know, Reeves, he said, I need to tell you something about why I'm here, about what I'm fighting for. Morgan glanced at him. You don't have to. Yeah, I do, because if this goes bad, I want someone to know. He pulled something from his vest pocket, a photograph, creased, worn, protected in a plastic sleeve. Her name is Sophia, Walsh said. His voice changed when he said the name. Softer, vulnerable. She's 3 years old, turns 4 next month, November 15th. He held the photo where Morgan could see it, a little girl with blonde curls in her father's eyes, holding a stuffed horse that was almost as big as she was. That horse, Walsh continued, his name is Mr. Hopper. I bought it for her first birthday. Biggest stuffed animal in the store. My wife said it was too big, too expensive. But Sophia saw it and her whole face lit up. So I bought it. And now she sleeps with it every night. She's beautiful, Morgan said, and meant it. Every night before bed, she makes me FaceTime. Doesn't matter where I am, what time zone, what I'm doing, she makes me call. And when I do, she holds the phone up to Mr. Hopper's ear. Because I have to say goodnight to both of them. That's the rule. Walsh's voice cracked. Last week, she asked me when I'm coming home. I told her soon. She asked if soon means before her birthday. I said yes, I promised her. He looked at Morgan, his eyes wet. So I need to make it off this bridge. Because I promised my daughter I'd be there for her 4th birthday, and I always keep my promises to Sophia. Morgan didn't know what to say. What words could possibly matter in the face of that? You'll be there, she finally said. I'll make sure of it. You can't promise that. I just did. She moved to the southern edge of the bridge, found the maintenance walkway she'd spotted earlier, a narrow catwalk suspended 15 feet below the road surface by corroded brackets. Where are you going? Walsh called. Maintenance catwalk. From down there, I'll have a downward angle into the gorge, clear line of sight to the climbers. That also leaves you exposed to fire from the west. I know, you cover the western approach. I'll handle the climbers. Morgan swung her legs over the rail. The metal was cold, slick with condensation. She found the ladder and started down. The catwalk was worse than she'd imagined. 18 inches of steel grating, 60 feet of nothing below. The river churning over rocks that would pulverize bone. She found a position between 2 support beams. Natural rest for her rifle. From here, she could see the entire gorge wall. Could see the climbers making their way down. 150 feet above the river now. Moving in pairs. Professional. Efficient. These weren't weekend hikers. These were men with military training. Morgan settled behind her scope. Range 210 meters. Angle 30 degrees downward. Wind minimal inside the gorge. Target equipment, not flesh. The lead climber reached a ledge. Paused to set a new anchor, his hands busy with rope and carabiners, his attention focused on the rock face. Morgan put her crosshair on the carabiner, connecting his harness to the anchor line. Breathed. The cold air filled her lungs. She let half of it out, held the rest, found that space between heartbeats where everything goes quiet. Fired. The round struck metal, the carabiner shattered. The climber's rope went slack. For one terrible second, he hung by nothing. Gravity pulling him toward the rocks below. Then his partner caught the belay. Arrested his fall with a jerk that had to hurt, but beat falling 60 feet. The climber screamed, not pain, terror. He was hanging by his partner's grip alone, boots scrambling against bare rock, hands clawing for purchase. His partner hauled him back to the ledge. Both men pressed flat against the wall, eyes scanning the darkness above, searching for the shooter they couldn't see. Morgan shifted to the second pair. They'd frozen on the rock face, one clinging to a handhold like his life depended on it. Because it did. The other wrapped around a fixed piton. She didn't fire, didn't need to. The message was clear. I can see you, I can hit what I want. The next shot might not be equipment. 3 minutes of silence. Then slowly the lead pair began climbing back up, away from the river, away from the bridge, away from the woman with a rifle who could hit a carabiner at 200 meters in the dark. The second pair followed. Morgan exhaled, a long breath that shook on the way out. Not from cold, from the adrenaline dump of having held 4 men's lives in her crosshair and chosen not to end them. Reeves, Walsh's voice from above. Urgent. Western side, they're doing something. She scrambled back up the ladder. By the time she reached the bridge deck, she could hear it. An engine, not from the road, from below, from the river. She ran to the western rail and looked down. A boat. An inflatable Zodiac with an outboard motor, cutting through the black water directly beneath the bridge. 6 men aboard, all armed, all heading for the eastern bank. They went under us, Walsh said, disbelief in his voice. While you were watching the climbers, they launched a boat from upstream. The Zodiac was already past the bridge, heading downstream toward the eastern bank. In 5 minutes, they'd land. In 10, they'd be on the road behind them. 4 wounded soldiers in a crossfire wouldn't last 30 seconds. Morgan's mind raced. Options, scenarios, outcomes. Walsh, keep your rifle on that boat, she said. Aldridge, find me something that floats. Anything. Fuel can, cooler, debris. Now. Aldridge dragged himself across the deck, arms only, his shattered legs trailing uselessly, found a plastic ammo can that had fallen from the convoy. Morgan grabbed it, pulled the smoke grenade from her vest. The last one. Taped it to the ammo can with medical tape, pulled the pin, then hurled it over the eastern rail. The can hit the water 30 meters downstream from the Zodiac. 3 seconds later, thick orange smoke erupted, billowing across the river in a massive cloud that swallowed everything. The Zodiac crew couldn't see their landing zone. The pilot cut the engine. The boat drifted sideways in the current. Morgan raised her rifle, put a round through the outboard motor. The engine coughed, sputtered, died. The Zodiac began spinning, 6 armed men suddenly helpless on a river they couldn't control. The current grabbed them, pulled them past the eastern bank, past the bridge, into the rapids below. They're gone, Aldridge called, drifting downstream into the rapids. Morgan lowered her rifle. That was our last smoke grenade. And you used it on a river, Walsh said. I used it to save 4 lives. She checked her watch. 0042 hours. 5 hours, 36 minutes until dawn. She'd stopped the climbing team, neutralized the boat team, blown a gap in the bridge. But Hargrave still had 30 fighters, still had heavy weapons, and he'd just lost 2 approaches in a row, which meant the next one would be different. The loudspeaker crackled. Hargrave's voice. But different now. The professional calm was gone. What replaced it was something harder, colder. You're not a medic. Morgan's blood froze. I've been watching your shots, Hargrave continued. The radio at 50 meters, the climbing anchor at 210, the outboard motor on a moving target in the dark. Pause. Long enough for the words to sink in. There's only one person I've ever heard of who shoots like that. A ghost story they used to tell at Fort Bragg. About a woman sniper who could thread a needle at 800 meters, and then stitch the wound closed afterward. Morgan's hands were shaking, not from cold. I know who you are, Ghost of Helmand Province. And now that I know what I'm facing, everything changes. The loudspeaker died. Silence settled over the bridge like a shroud. Thorne spoke first. His voice was wet, damaged, but steady. He knows. He knows a name, Morgan said. Names don't stop bullets. No, but names change tactics. He'll come harder now, smarter, because he knows he's not fighting a medic. He's fighting an operator. Morgan knelt beside Thorne, checked his pulse. Weak, too fast, his skin was cold and clammy. How long do I have? Thorne asked. Really? Morgan looked at him, this man who'd led soldiers through combat, who had a wife waiting at home, who deserved honesty even when honesty hurt. 4 hours, maybe less. If I don't get you to a surgeon, the internal bleeding will overwhelm you. You'll go into irreversible shock. Thorne closed his eyes. 4 hours, dawn is in 5:36. Yes, he laughed, a wet, pained sound. Then you better hold this bridge, Reeves, because I've got cornbread to eat and a wife who sings in the shower, and I'm not missing that for anything. Morgan stood, walked to the western edge, but before she could settle into position, Thorne called out again. Reeves, one more thing. She turned. My left cargo pocket. Reach in. Morgan moved back to him, reached into his pocket, felt something hard and rectangular. Pulled it out. A radio. Small, military issue. AN/P, RC-112G emergency beacon, the kind issued to downed pilots and special operations personnel. She stared at it, then at Thorne. You had this the whole time. Was Delta before infantry, Thorne said, a ghost of a smile on his cracked lips. 8 years, 2 deployments to Mogadishu, 3 to Iraq. Kept the beacon. Old habits die hard. Why didn't you tell me about this earlier? Because earlier I thought we'd die before it mattered. Thought the whole thing was hopeless. But then I watched you stop a climbing team in a boat assault with precision shots in the dark. Watched you blow the bridge to cut off their advance. And I realized something. What? You're not going to let us die on this bridge. You're too damn stubborn, too damn skilled. So I'm giving you the beacon, because you've earned the right to call or help. Morgan powered it on. The screen lit up green. Emergency beacon active. Signal acquired. Transmitting coordinates. She pressed the transmit button. Any station? Any station. This is Lieutenant Morgan Reeves, U.S. Army Combat Medic, position. Blackwater Bridge, Fayette-Raleigh County line. 4 critical casualties. Enemy force of 40-plus fighters with heavy weapons. Requesting immediate extraction and close air support. How copy? Static. Then a voice. Clear. Professional. Impossibly calm. Blackwater, this is Warhammer 6-100 1st Aviation Regiment. We raid you 5 by 5. Confirming your beacon coordinates. What is your situation? Morgan's eyes burned. She blinked hard. Not now. Couldn't break now. Warhammer 6, I have 4 wounded. 1 critical with penetrating chest trauma and internal bleeding. 1 with hemothorax. 1 bilateral lower extremity fractures. 1 hand trauma and shoulder wound. Enemy force estimated 43 fighters with heavy weapons, technicals, mortars. Bridge is partially destroyed. I am the only combat effective personnel on site. Copy Blackwater. Understand 4 urgent surgical. Enemy force 4-3 with heavy weapons. Bridge compromised. You are the only able defender. Is that correct? Affirmative, Warhammer 6. Roger, we are spinning up 2 AH-64 Apache gunships and 1 UH-60 medevac from Firebase Condor. ETA is pause. Voices in the background. Someone checking maps. Calculating distance and fuel and loadout time. 94 minutes. Morgan's stomach dropped. Warhammer 6, I need faster. I have a patient who will not survive 94 minutes. Blackwater, I understand, but that is fastest available asset. Apaches are refueling and arming now. 94 minutes is best case. Can you hold your position? Could she hold 94 minutes, an hour and a half, with 4 magazines and 43 fighters who now knew exactly who she was? Morgan looked at Thorne, at Walsh, at Aldridge, at Eliza. Affirmative, Warhammer 6, we will hold. Outstanding, Blackwater. Warhammer 6 out. Help is coming. Hold your ground. The radio went silent. Morgan clipped the beacon to her vest, turned to her soldiers. 94 minutes, she said. 1 hour, 34 minutes until the cavalry arrives. Walsh closed his eyes. Aldridge let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Thorne just looked at her. That's a long time, Reeves. It's a lifetime, Morgan said, and that's exactly what it's going to buy us. She checked her watch. 0042 hours. Expected Apache arrival, 0216 hours. 94 minutes. She moved to the western rail. Out there in the fog and darkness, Hargrave was planning, calculating, preparing his next move. And Morgan Reeves, who'd killed 214 people and sworn she'd never kill again, stood ready to defend 4 Americans against whatever came next. 94 minutes until salvation. But first she had to survive. 02 hours, 18 minutes. The screaming started without warning. Not from the enemy side, from behind Morgan, from Eliza. Morgan spun and dropped to her knees. Eliza's eyes were wide open but seeing nothing. Her body arched off the ground, hands clawing at the shrapnel wounds across her abdomen. The bandages Morgan had applied were soaked through. Dark blood, too much of it. Brennan, Eliza, look at me. Eliza's mouth opened. Only a gurgling moan came out. Her fingers found Morgan's wrist and gripped with desperate strength. You're okay. I've got you. Stay with me. Morgan ripped open her medkit, the last of her supplies. No more hemostatic gauze. She had pressure bandages, IV fluids, morphine. Nothing that would stop this kind of bleeding. She peeled back the saturated bandages. The wounds were worse than she'd thought. Much worse. The shrapnel had gone deep, torn through muscle, maybe into organs. And now Eliza was bleeding internally faster than her body could compensate. Morgan pressed fresh bandages directly into the wounds. Eliza screamed, a raw animal sound that echoed off the steel trusses. "Hold her down," Morgan snapped. Walsh crawled over, pinned Eliza's shoulders with his one good arm. His face was gray. He was losing blood too, slower than Eliza, but steady. "How bad?" Walsh asked. "She needs a surgeon, not a medic on a bridge." "That's not what I asked." Miss Morgan met his eyes. "If I don't stop this bleeding in the next 10 minutes, she's going to code. And I don't have the equipment to bring her back." Walsh's jaw tightened. He leaned down close to Eliza's ear. "Hey, Brennan, you remember Fort Campbell? Before we deployed, you told me about your bakery plan. Remember?" Eliza's eyes flickered. Recognition. Faint but present. "You said you were going to open the best bakery in Louisville. Cuban bread, Irish soda bread, all of it. You said you already had the storefront picked out. Bardstown Road, near the university." A sound came from Eliza's throat. Not quite a word, but almost. "You don't get to die on a bridge in West Virginia, Corporal." "That's not the story. That's not how this ends. You hear me?" Morgan worked fast, repacked the wounds, applied fresh pressure bandages, started a second IV line, the last bag of saline. Eliza's pulse was 130 and climbing, her body fighting, spending everything it had. For 20 minutes, Morgan held pressure, adjusted bandages, monitored vitals, whispered words that might have been prayers if she'd believed in anything beyond flesh and physics. At 0247, Eliza's breathing changed. Not the labored, shallow breaths of before, not the rattling wheeze Morgan had been monitoring. Eliza's chest simply stopped moving. Her eyes stared at nothing. Her mouth hung open. Her pulse was gone. No. Morgan's hands were moving before her mind caught up. Interlocking fingers, positioning over sternum. "No, no, no." She began CPR. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. The rhythm was automatic, mechanical. Her body knew it like breathing. "Come on, Eliza. Come on." 30 compressions. 2 breaths. "You've got a bakery to open. Remember Cuban bread, best in Louisville." 30 compressions. 2 breaths. Walsh watched, silent. His expression the kind that comes when witnessing something you can't stop. Something inevitable. Aldridge was crying, silent tears running down his 19-year-old face. "Reeves," Thorne's voice, weak, distant. She didn't stop. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. "Morgan, listen to me." 30 compressions, 2 breaths. "She's been down too long. The blood loss was too severe." "There's nothing." "I said I'm working." Morgan's voice cracked. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. She felt a rib crack beneath her palms. Kept going. 2 minutes. 3. 4. Her arms burned. Her shoulders screamed. Sweat poured down her face despite the October cold. At the 5-minute mark, she stopped. Pressed 2 fingers to Eliza's carotid. Nothing. Held a hand over her mouth. No breath. Morgan sat back, looked down at Eliza's face. 23 years old. Corporal Eliza Brennan from Louisville, Kentucky, who made bread at 0300 because she believed in futures, who had a storefront picked out on Bardstown Road, who was supposed to open a bakery and make Cuban bread and Irish soda bread and all of it, dead on a bridge in West Virginia. Nobody spoke. Morgan closed Eliza's eyes, pulled the emergency blanket from her kit, the last one, draped it over the body. The silver material caught what little light there was and held it. Then she stood. Her hands were shaking, her vision blurred. Something inside her chest was cracking, spreading. A fault line running all the way back to Helmand Province. She'd lost a patient. On her bridge, under her care. Walsh saw it, saw the fracture spreading across her face. "Reeves, don't. Don't what? Don't go dark. We still need you. Thorne needs you. Aldridge needs you. I need you." "I lost her." Morgan's voice was hollow. "I had her right here, and I lost her. Brennan was dying before she hit this bridge. You bought her 3 extra hours. That's not failure. 3 hours wasn't enough." "No, it wasn't. And that's not your fault." Morgan turned away, walked to the western rail, gripped it with both hands until her knuckles went white. Walsh crawled after her, grabbed her ankle, made her look at him. "Listen to me," he said. You're the only reason any of us are still alive. You blew the bridge, stopped the climbers, stopped the boat team, called in the Apaches. You've done everything right. Everything. Except save Eliza. You can't save everyone. Nobody can. Not even the ghost of Helmond. Morgan looked down at him, at this man with 3 fingers gone and a daughter waiting at home, who was bleeding through a tourniquet and still trying to hold her together. I need to tell you something, Walsh said. About my daughter, about Sophia. Walsh, you don't... Her birthday is in 2 weeks, November 15th. She's turning 4, and she asked me if I'd be home for it. I promised her I would. I looked my 3-year-old daughter in the eyes and I promised. He pulled the photo from his vest again. The little girl with the stuffed horse. If you won't fight for yourself, if you won't break your oath to save your own life, maybe you'll do it to save mine. Because that little girl needs her daddy, and I promised her I'd be there. Morgan stared at the photo, at Sophia's face, at the hope in a child's eyes. I can't carry more ghosts, Walsh. Then don't. Keep us alive, all of us. And that little girl gets to blow out 4 candles with her daddy watching. That's not creating a ghost. That's preventing one. Morgan looked at the silver blanket where Eliza lay, at the 3 wounded men behind her, at the 43 fighters in the darkness who were coming. Something shifted inside her. Not a break, a hardening, like steel cooling after being heated past its limit. She'd lost one. She would not lose 3 more. How much time? She asked. Walsh checked his watch. 28 minutes until the Apaches. Then we hold for 28 minutes, no matter what. She moved back to her position, but the night wasn't done with them yet. At 02:25 hours, Hargrave sent everyone. Not in waves, not in phases. Every fighter he had left. All at once, from every direction. The sound came first. Boots. Dozens of boots hammering pavement, crunching gravel, pounding through underbrush. The sound of desperation and overwhelming force. Here they come, Walsh shouted. West side, at least 20. East side, Aldridge called. The same 5 from before, fresh weapons. Morgan's mind became pure calculation. Western approached 20 fighters, but they couldn't cross the gap. They'd provide suppressive fire. Eastern approached 5 fighters coming straight up the intact section. That was the kill move. Ridge 8 shooters with elevation. They'd pin her while the Eastern team closed. Walsh, Western suppression. Keep their heads down. Roger. Aldridge, Eastern approach, same as before. Legs and ankles. Got it. The Ridge shooters opened first. Rounds hammered the deck in a pattern meant to suppress. Morgan pressed flat. Let the steel pylons absorb what they could. Walsh's rifle barked from the west, deliberate shots, each one a reminder that crossing the cables meant dying. The Eastern team charged, 5 men sprinting up the road. The point man hurdled the rebar tripwire cleanly. Second man followed. Third caught it with his trailing foot. Stumbled, but didn't fall. Aldridge fired. Hit the point man's boot heel. The fighter's stride broke. Slowed him for 1 critical second. Morgan picked up the slack. First round through the second man's kneecap. He dropped, screaming, clutching his leg. Third man raised his weapon toward Aldridge. Morgan shifted, fired twice. First round destroyed the rifle stock. Second hit his bicep. Arm went limp. Rifle clattered to deck. 3 down, 2 still coming. The fourth fighter was fast, closed to 10 meters before Morgan could track him. Aldridge fired point blank, missed. The man dove behind a pylon, now inside their perimeter. Aldridge, he's behind your 2 o'clock. I know, I can hear him. The fighter popped out, leveled his weapon at Aldridge. Morgan fired, hit the weapon at the magazine well. The rifle split apart. Fragments peppered the fighter's face. He staggered back, screaming, clutching his eyes. Aldridge grabbed the man's ankle, pulled. The fighter hit the deck. Aldridge, 19 years old with 2 shattered legs, wrapped both arms around the man's torso and held on. I got him, Sarge. I got him. The 5th fighter hesitated. 1 second of indecision. Morgan put a round at his feet. He ran. But the Western fire intensified. And then Morgan heard boots land on the deck behind her. 2 fighters had crossed the cables. They were on the bridge, between her and her wounded. One of them looked down at Eliza's silver blanket, said something to his partner, then raised his boot and kicked the blanket aside. He looked at Eliza's face, laughed, said something else. Both men laughed. Something inside Morgan detonated, pure primal rage older than any oath she'd ever sworn. She didn't aim for legs, didn't aim for shoulders. She aimed center mass, right at the heart of the man who'd kicked Eliza's blanket. Her finger found the trigger, found the press. 1 millimeter from ending a life, Time crystallized. The world went silent. In that fraction of a second, Morgan saw everything. The boy in Helmand province, 8 years old, blue shirt, standing behind a Taliban commander, the round going through his chest, the light leaving his eyes. She saw Eliza's face, 23 years old, dead because Morgan couldn't save her. She saw Walsh's daughter, Sophia, waiting for a father who might never come home. She saw every choice she'd made tonight, every shot placed low instead of lethal, every life spared because killing was easy and restraint was hard. And she made the choice again. Not because it was easy, not because anyone would thank her, not because it made sense, because it was who she was and who she'd sworn to be. And some oaths were worth keeping even when the world gave you every reason to break them. She pulled her aim down 2 feet, fired. The round shattered the fighter's chin, not his chest, his shin. He collapsed, screaming, alive. Partner spun. Morgan hit him in the thigh, through and through. He went down next to his friend, both alive, both screaming, both breathing. Morgan's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the rifle. Not from fatigue, from what she'd almost done, from how close she'd come to becoming the ghost again. And then she heard it. Rotors, deep percussive thunder that shook the air. Twin-engine fury that turned fog into vortexes. 2 AH-64 Apache gunships crested the eastern ridge. Nose down, weapons pods bristling, searchlights cutting through darkness like white-hot blades. The lead Apache banked hard. Its 30-millimeter chain gun rotated toward the western tree line. The loudspeaker boomed. All armed personnel, drop your weapons and lie face down. You have 10 seconds to comply. This is your only warning. The tree line erupted, not with gunfire, with surrender. Men throwing down rifles, men running, men dropping flat with hands behind heads. Hargrave's 43 fighter force disintegrated in 10 seconds. Behind the Apaches, a UH-60 Black Hawk descended. Red crosses on its flanks, the medevac bird. Morgan shielded her eyes from the rotor wash, watched the birds settle onto the bridge with surgical precision. Crew chief jumped out. 2 medics, flight surgeon. How many casualties? Morgan's voice was steady, professional. 3 surviving wounded, 1 KIA. Sergeant Garrett Thorne, penetrating chest trauma, internal bleeding, critical. Specialist Declan Walsh, arterial bleed tourniquet, 3 hours urgent. Private Finn Aldridge, bilateral lower extremity fractures, stable. The surgeon nodded. Load Thorne first. They lifted Thorne onto a litter, his eyes opened, focused on Morgan. It's Wednesday, he whispered. Tell Sarah I made it to Wednesday. Morgan squeezed his hand. Tell her yourself. You've got cornbread to eat. Walsh next. He grabbed Morgan's wrist as they carried him past. Sophia's birthday, November 15th. You're invited. There'll be a cake with a horse on it. Mr. Hopper, Morgan said. I remember. Aldridge laughed, looking up at her from the litter. Sarge, thank you for not letting me die. You weren't dying tonight, Aldridge. I wouldn't allow it. The Black Hawk door closed, lifted off, gone. Morgan stood alone on the bridge. Dawn was breaking. 6:18 hours, right on schedule, gold light painting the steel trusses. She walked to where Eliza lay, knelt, placed one hand on the silver blanket. I'm sorry, Eliza. I'm sorry I couldn't buy you enough time. A figure approached from the western gap, hands raised. Colonel Vincent Hargrave. He stopped at the edge, 40 feet between them. You held it, he said. 1 medic against 43, and you held the bridge. Morgan stood, stepped to the gap's edge. Your man kicked my patient's blanket. She was 23, wanted to open a bakery. Hargrave said nothing. Holding a bridge, Morgan said, means standing between the living and the dead, and choosing every second with every round to add to the living. Your 43 men are alive, all wounded, all defeated, but breathing, because I held this bridge without hatred, without revenge, without becoming you. Hargrave stared, then slowly knelt, hands behind his head, surrendered. The extraction captain arrived, looked at the carnage, at the 40-foot gap, at Morgan. He saw the trident under her vest. You're the ghost from Helmand. Morgan pulled the badge, held it, looked at it, the eagle, the pistol, the anchor, the deadliest warrior she'd been. She slid it back under her medic patch. That woman doesn't exist anymore. Then who held this bridge? Morgan looked at Eliza's blanket, at the blood trails, at the gap. A medic, she said, just a medic. Epilogue, 6 months later, Louisville, Kentucky, November 15th. The bakery on Bardstown Road had a ribbon across the door, blue and white, the colors of Kentucky. The sign above read, Brennan's Bread, opening soon. Inside, Morgan stood with a woman who had Eliza's eyes, Mrs. Brennan, Eliza's mother. They were alone in the space that smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. She had everything planned, Mrs. Brennan said, touching the counter where her daughter would have worked. The layout, the menu, the suppliers, everything. Morgan said nothing. What could she say? The army sent her things, her footlocker. Inside was a notebook, pages and pages of plans, recipes, business projections. Mrs. Brennan's voice broke. She was so close to making it real. Mrs. Brennan, Morgan said, I need you to know, I tried. I did everything. I know. The older woman turned, eyes wet but steady. The other soldiers told me how you carried them, how you held that bridge, how you stayed with Eliza until the end. She reached out, took Morgan's hand. Thank you, she said, for giving my daughter 3 more hours, for fighting to keep her alive, for not leaving her alone. Morgan's chest tightened. I'm sorry it wasn't enough. It was enough for Eliza. She died with someone who cared. That matters. Mrs. Brennan walked to the window, looked out at Bardstown Road, at the foot traffic, at the life continuing. We're still opening, she said, my husband and I, in Eliza's name, using her plans, her recipes, everything she wanted. That's, Morgan's voice caught. That's beautiful. We want you to be here for the opening. Will you come? Morgan looked around the space, at the dream Eliza would never see completed, at the legacy she'd left behind. Yes, Morgan said, I'll be here. She reached into her jacket, pulled out something wrapped in cloth, handed it to Mrs. Brennan. What's this? Open it. Mrs. Brennan unwrapped the cloth. Inside was the Navy SEAL trident, the badge Morgan had carried for 7 years, the symbol of the deadliest warrior she'd been. I can't accept this, Mrs. Brennan said. I want you to have it, to remember that your daughter didn't die alone on that bridge. She died defended by someone who'd been the best at what they did, someone who chose to be a medic instead of a killer, someone your daughter helped inspire to be better. Mrs. Brennan held the trident, turned it over in her hands. She would have liked you, she said. I liked her too. They stood together in the empty bakery, in the space between what was and what would be, in the silence where grief and hope occupied the same breath. That same afternoon, Huntsville, Alabama. The backyard was full of 4-year-olds, running, screaming, hopped up on cake and ice cream, and the immortal energy of children who believe birthdays are magic. Morgan stood at the edge of the chaos, watching Walsh chase Sophia around the yard. His right hand was different now, prosthetic fingers where 3 had been, but functional, enough to grab his daughter and lift her squealing into the air. Sophia wore a crown made of construction paper and glitter. The birthday girl, 4 years old today. Walsh saw Morgan, waved her over. Sarge, you made it. Told you I would. Sophia ran to Morgan. No shyness, no hesitation, just a 4-year-old who'd heard stories about the woman who helped her daddy come home. Are you Miss Morgan? I am. Daddy says you're a hero. Morgan knelt down, eye level with this little girl who had her father's eyes. Your daddy's the hero. I just helped him get back to you. Sophia considered this, then threw her arms around Morgan's neck. Hugged tight. Thank you for bringing my daddy home. Morgan's eyes burned. She hugged back. You're welcome, sweetheart. Walsh pulled Morgan aside later, when the cake was eaten and the presents opened, and Sophia was running around with Mr. Hopper under her arm. I heard about Thorne, Walsh said, that he made it, full recovery. Yeah, he's back in Knoxville, eating cornbread and listening to his wife sing in the shower. And Aldridge, Walter Reed, learning to walk on prosthetics, they say he'll be running by spring. Walsh nodded, quiet for a moment. Then, I also heard you went to Louisville, to Brennan's mother. Yeah, that must have been hard. It was, but necessary. They watched Sophia play, this little girl who almost lost her father, who got to have birthdays because Morgan had held a bridge without killing. You ever regret it? Walsh asked. Not breaking your oath, not taking the easier path. Morgan thought about it, really thought, about the boy in Helmand, about Eliza, about the 2 fighters she'd almost killed, about 43 men who went home wounded but alive. No, she said, I don't regret it, because that little girl gets to have her daddy, and I get to live with myself. That's enough. 3 weeks later, Blackwater Bridge. Morgan stood at the eastern edge. The bridge had been repaired, the 40-foot gap filled with new steel, stronger than before. A plaque had been installed on the eastern pylon, bronze, weatherproofed. It read, "On this bridge, October 27th, 4 American soldiers defended against overwhelming force. Corporal Eliza Brennan gave her life in service. Lieutenant Morgan Reeves, Sergeant Garrett Thorne Specialist Declan Walsh, and Private Finn Aldridge held this position for 8 hours until rescue arrived. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to stand when falling would be easier." Morgan touched Eliza's name, traced the letters with her finger. A car pulled up. Thorne got out, then Walsh, then Aldridge on crutches but standing. They'd come back, all of them, to remember, to honor, to close this chapter. They stood together at the edge where Morgan had made her stand, where she'd chosen restraint over revenge, where she'd held a bridge, not with hate, but with the stubborn refusal to let death win. "You know," Thorne said, "they wanted to give you a medal, the brass Congressional Medal of Honor, for holding this bridge." "I heard," I declined. Why? Morgan looked at the water below, at the gorge that had witnessed everything. "Because I didn't hold this bridge as a warrior. I held it as a medic, and medics don't get medals for not killing. They get to save lives. That's the reward." Walsh put his hand on her shoulder. "You saved all of us. I lost one. You saved 3. In my book, that's a win." They stood in silence. 4 soldiers who'd shared the longest night of their lives, who'd come out the other side changed but alive. "What now?" Aldridge asked. "What do we do now?" Morgan looked at him, at all of them. "We live," she said. "We live the lives Eliza didn't get to. We eat birthday cakes and Sunday cornbread, and we walk on new legs, and we remember. We remember that we survived, and we honor that survival by being better than the war tried to make us." The sun set over Blackwater Bridge, gold and red painting the steel and fire. 4 soldiers walked away, leaving the past on that bridge, carrying the future forward. And somewhere in the mountains, where fog still rolled through steel truss and the river still churned below the bridge stood, holding, strong, unbroken, a monument to the hardest fight there is, not the one where you take lives, but the one where you save them.